You're sitting on a wooden stool that creaks just loud enough to annoy the silence. The candle's already stubby, flickering like it's tired of this life. And you're crying. Again, not loudly, just the kind of crying where your shoulders twitch a little and your nose betrays you with that one stupid sniff. The apothecary says it's the humors. Of course it is. It's always the humors. Too much black bile, probably, or not enough phlegm, or maybe your blood has gotten cocky and needs a good bleeding. Either way, your tears aren't your fault. They belong to your organs. You wipe your face on your sleeve. It doesn't help. That sleeve hasn't seen water since last St. Agnes's Day. It mostly smells like onion soup and regret. Outside, a dog howls. Inside, someone's trying not to cough. They fail, loudly, and now your crying seems even more dramatic. You try to distract yourself. There's a tapestry on the wall. It shows a nobleman stabbing a dragon. The dragon looks more like a confused donkey, but you stare at it anyway. Maybe you envy the donkey. He got to be part of something. You're just trying to remember if you already added vinegar to your barley mush. They told you not to worry. Everyone feels a little imbalanced this time of year. The wind changes. The moon does something suspicious. Even Brother Hugh snapped at a chicken yesterday, and he's a monk. But you feel it in your bones, in your breath, like your soul is wearing a wet tunic, and no one will let you take it off. It started last week, or maybe last year. You were walking home from the market, and your feet just stopped, right in the mud. You looked up and realized you didn't know why you were walking, or where, or for what. Of course, the local healer had an answer. She always does. Ah, she said, poking your wrist like it owed her money. Yes, your yellow bile is in rebellion. You nodded, pretending you understood. She handed you a pouch of crushed roots and told you to sleep facing north. Helps the energy, she whispered. Her breath smelled like roasted leeks and something vaguely dead. You tried it. Nothing changed. Except now your neck hurt and your candle rolled off the windowsill in protest. Someone said you should try leeches. A boy near the well swears his cousin's wife's uncle got happier after 20 leeches to the thighs. You considered it, but the leech lady lives 2 towns over, and you're still haunted by how she smiled at your ankle that one time. So here you are, crying again and blaming the humors because that's what everyone does. They blame everything on humors. Your neighbor's son throws turnips at the priest, clearly too much choler. The cow refuses to give milk. She's probably melancholic, needs parsley and a stern talking to. You're 23 and tired in your soul. The barber says a good bloodletting will cheer you up. So you sit and cry and wait. Wait for someone to notice. Wait for the humors to balance. Wait for your life to stop feeling like a worn out glove on the wrong hand. Your mother used to say sadness was just winter trying to get inside your heart. But she also used to talk to bread loaves. So, in the background, someone shuffles across the floor. Probably your cousin again. He swears the floorboards whisper when he walks, which is either poetic or terrifying. You wonder if you should eat something. Maybe your spleen is hungry, or your bile needs wine. You pour yourself a cup of elderberry tonic. It tastes like bitter disappointment and dirt. but they say it calms the mind. You hope it calms your eyes too. It doesn't. You light a bit of rosemary and wave it around like you're casting a spell. It smells like burned dreams. Your friend Marie once tried to cheer herself up by marrying a man who owned 3 goats. She still cries. Now she just has more goats watching her. There's a knock on the door. It's probably the priest again. He's worried you've got spirits in your head. You do. They're just called feelings, and no one has invented therapy yet. He'll tell you to pray. Maybe fast. Maybe chant something that sounds like sneezing. You'll nod. You always do. But when the door closes and the candle flickers low again, you'll still feel it. That weight. That ache behind the eyes. They don't have a word for depression yet. They just say, you're imbalanced, too cold, too moist, or not pious enough. They say your humors are fighting, but really, you're just tired of pretending your soul doesn't hurt. So you sit and cry, and for once, you don't even wipe your tears away. Because maybe, just maybe, this is the only honest thing you've done all day. And yes, the humors will get blamed. They always do. But you'll just be here, quiet, heavy, still trying. It wasn't comfort, but it was life. And somehow, for now, it was a nudge. You're lying on a cot made of straw and quiet regret, staring at the ceiling, which is mostly made of smoke and splinters. The fire has gone out. Again, your toes feel like boiled turnips left in the snow too long. And somewhere in the next room, someone is groaning about a headache that sounds like it involves a ghost. You, though, you're not groaning. You're just tired in that deep, slow way that makes your bones feel like they're sighing. And your stomach's not empty, but it's also not full of anything worth remembering. Just yesterday's cabbage and disappointment. And now the village doctor is here. He smells like pickled eggs and wet wood. He carries a sack. The sack is wriggling. You already know what's in it, because today, your feelings are going to be bled out through your thighs. Too much black bile, he says, not even looking at your face. Classic sorrow. Textbook. Textbook where? You wonder. The man can barely write his name, but somehow he's memorized an entire emotional theory based on the color of your imaginary liquids. You nod anyway, because this is how things are. You're not sad. You're not burned out. You're not trapped in a life that feels like you borrowed it from someone duller. No, no. You're simply hosting an unwanted banquet of melancholic humors. And the leeches? They're the invited guests. The doctor rolls up your pant leg like he's unveiling a painting. You flinch, not from fear, just from the chill and the shame of being reduced to a collection of fluids. You'll feel lighter, he says, reaching into the sack with the casual confidence of someone who's done this to a lot of villagers. Some of them are probably dead now, not from the leeches, just from life being, well, medieval. The leeches are cold, slimy, suckers in every sense of the word. One latches on like it's greeting an old friend. You close your eyes. Apparently, this is self-care, circa 1324. You think about Marie again. She got leeches last month after crying at a baptism. She said they made her feel empty, but not in a good way. Still, everyone clapped, said she looked less cloudy, less cloudy. That's the goal. You lie there, letting the leeches have their feast. The doctor hums something tuneless. There's a chicken outside, screaming about nothing. You envy the chicken. Best to bleed out before dusk, he says softly, adjusting a jar. Else your humors get confused. You wonder if your humors are always confused. Maybe they just need a map, or a nap, or someone to ask, are you really okay? Without recommending insects as therapy, but no one does that. Not here. Here, sadness is a problem for your blood to solve, not your heart, not your mind, just your internal soup of elements you didn't ask for. You think of the other treatments, the rosemary poultice, the prayer circles, the neighbor who tried drinking honey mixed with ashes. He still twitches. The leeches are full now. One of them pops off with a burp that sounds like wet applause. You stare at the ceiling again, still sad, but now itchy too. The doctor gives you a smile, the kind that says, you'll thank me once the dizziness kicks in. He packs up the leeches like precious cargo. They'll be reused. Nothing is wasted. Here, not even your pain. As he leaves, he pats your shoulder and says, you'll feel better in a few days. If not, try fasting, or confession, or just more leeches, for more feelings. You sit up slowly. Your leg bleeds onto the straw, which now smells like sadness and swamp. You limp to the doorway and watch the smoke rise from the baker's chimney. Life goes on, even if you don't want it to, even if your humors are still throwing a tantrum. In your rib cage, you wonder if, centuries from now, people will laugh at this. Will they understand that you weren't weak? You were just working with what you had? That you weren't broken, just bleeding in more ways than anyone knew how to fix? You sit on the edge of your bed and breathe, not deeply, just enough. The room is still. The leeches are gone. But the heaviness, that stayed. It wasn't healing, but it was something. And somehow, for now, it had to be enough. You've been staring at the same fireplace for 3 days. It's not even lit, just a black, sooty hole full of yesterday's ash and last winter's hopes. Your cousin offered to relight it this morning, but then he remembered he's allergic to effort. The doctor came by. Again. He didn't take your pulse. He didn't ask questions. He just looked you up and down, sighed like you had offended him, and said, go for a walk. Ah, yes, the cure for all things. Sad, walk. Tired, walk. Your entire soul feels like it's been stepped on by a muddy boot. Walk. You didn't argue. You just nodded. Because in 1803, disagreeing with the town doctor means you're either hysterical or secretly a witch. So now here you are, walking. Your shoes are stiff. They've been broken in by at least 3 people before you. One of them, apparently, had very creative toes. The ground is a mix of gravel, puddles, and mystery. The air smells like chimney smoke, horse droppings, and something floral, trying very hard to survive. There's a crow staring at you from a fence post, like he knows you're not okay. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. Rude. You pass a creek. It's babbling like it's got secrets. You'd talk to it, but someone might see, and you don't need a second prescription of go walk some more, but faster. You reach the tree line. The path thins. Your thoughts don't. They keep whispering about things you forgot, about people you miss, about how walking it off works better for stubbed toes than for existential dread. Still, you keep walking because what else is there? The doctor didn't say where to walk. He just said away. So you go, away from the silent meals, away from the neighbors who whisper, away from the priest who asked if you'd been entertaining dark spirits lately. You wanted to say, just the one that lives in my chest. But instead, you said, no, Father, like a good little soul. The trees start to open. There's a field. Someone left a broken cart there, one wheel missing, the other spinning in. The wind, like it's still trying. You sit down beside it, not because you're tired, okay? Yes, because you're tired, but also because something about that broken cart makes you feel seen. The grass is wet. The sun tries to warm you through the clouds like a shy friend. You let it. You think about going back. You probably should. You've walked. That was the therapy. You're cured now, right? Except you still feel that ache behind your ribs, that hollow thud of a heart that's been too brave for too long. You lie back in the grass and close your eyes. Somewhere, a bee buzzes past, a cow moos like it's heard your secrets. A breeze nudges your face gently, like the world saying, I know, you don't feel better. Not really, but you feel outside, and that's something. Maybe the doctor was half right. Not because walking fixes things, but because it moves you out of the walls, out of your head, out where the birds don't care that you cried during your porridge, where the wind doesn't ask why you're quiet, where the grass doesn't. It judge you for sitting too long. You'll go back soon. Someone will ask if you feel refreshed. You'll lie. You'll say yes. But between you and the broken cart and the whispering trees, you'll know the truth. It wasn't therapy, but for a moment, it was peace. And in 1803, that's about the best you can hope for. You haven't moved from the bench since sunrise. The sun is now somewhere behind a gray curtain of clouds, pretending not to see you. You're wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket that smells like sheep and soup, and your only task today was to fetch water. You didn't, and no one's shocked, because you, dear soul, are not lazy. You have melancholia. Apparently, that's what the town physician said yesterday, after poking your arm, sniffing your breath, and declaring you unfit for goat herding, conversation, or joy. Melancholia. It sounds fancy, like a Greek poem or a terrible wine, but really, it just means that your face looks like you've been thinking too hard about mortality since last Lent. Your aunt says you need to marry a blacksmith. Your uncle says you need more onions. The priest says you need to confess. The doctor says you need leeches, more bile, or possibly a nap near lavender. No one says the word sad. That's too casual. No, what you have is an imbalance, a disturbance, a thickening of the black bile. To quote your favorite diagnosis, scroll. So here you are, on a bench, in clothes that don't feel like yours, in a century that doesn't quite know what to do with people who feel like stone wrapped in skin. You try to explain it once to your cousin that everything feels too far away. The future, food, even your own hands. She offers you a boiled turnip and says, Same. The doctor had suggestions, of course. He always does. A cold bath, a bloodletting, a fast. You did the bath. You cried. You did the fast. You cried harder. You skipped the bloodletting. Because you're not that desperate. And yet, you still can't move. The goats have noticed. They walk past you like you've become part of the landscape. One licked your sleeve yesterday. You didn't react. You might be a scarecrow now. People whisper, but politely. She's resting her soul. They say. She's grieving something no one can see. She always was a bit tender in the head. You'd laugh, but that feels like a pre-melancholia version of you. The version who hummed while baking, who fixed roof holes with the smug satisfaction of someone who knew how to live. Now, the thought of sewing a tunic makes your chest hurt. You'd rather stare at the wall and think about nothing, and then think about why you're thinking about nothing, and then hate yourself for thinking at all. They don't have a word for depression yet, just melancholia. And sure, there are treatments. You could go lie in a field of violets. You could stare at a fire until your humors align. You could pray to a saint who specializes in vague emotions. But mostly, you sit, and people let you because no one knows what to say. And that, oddly, feels like the kindest part. Evening arrives without ceremony. The blanket is heavier now. Or maybe you are. You watch the sky turn to ink. You think about sleep, but you're already halfway there. Eyes open, heart closed. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You just live in a world that can't name your pain. So they call it melancholia. And somehow, that makes it your fault and your cure. But tonight, you don't argue. You just sit and breathe and let the silence hold you for once. It wasn't healing, but it was stillness. And in a century like this, that was rare enough to count. You've been staring at the same piece of linen for the past 2 hours. The thread hangs limp from your needle, mid-stitch, mid-thought, mid-life. The fire has gone out, again. But you're not cold, not exactly, just numb. The kind of numb that doesn't care if the tea is hot or the wind is howling. You are, by all accounts, a sad girl. Not the weeping kind, not the dramatic, fainting in corridor kind. No, you are the quiet kind, the kind that sighs without realizing, the kind whose eyes look past people as if there's something just behind them that only you can see. Spoiler, there isn't. But still, the housemaid told your mother you haven't smiled in 3 fortnights. Your mother, alarmed, consulted a physician. He peered at your cheeks, tapped your forehead, and nodded like he'd discovered the root of all sorrow. His prescription? Needlepoint. And silence. Of course. Why talk about feelings when you can stitch them into a rose that will never bloom? And so, here you are, in a stiff-backed chair, dressed in a gown you didn't pick, surrounded by the soothing sounds of everyone else pretending not to notice you unraveling, one cross-stitch at a time. The silence is mandatory. It's restorative. Apparently, talking might upset the humors, especially in women, especially in sad women. So now your emotions are to be sorted, pressed, and embroidered into acceptable little patterns. Flowers, birds, the occasional sad angel with one wing. Your aunt says needlework will occupy the mind, as if the mind is a mischievous child that needs a toy. She means well. Most people do. They just don't know how to say, I see your sadness, and it scares me. So instead, they hand you a hoop and tell you to make daisies. The needle moves. In, out, in, out. The rhythm is supposed to help, like breathing, but pointier. You tried to make a fox last week. It ended up looking like a melted cat. You cried. Quietly, of course. You didn't want the doctor to suggest more structured hobbies. He already thinks you should garden. Feel the earth, he said. Touch something real. You did. It was a worm. It did not help. Silence, though. Now that's enforced. They call it rest. But really, it's just no one wanting to hear the answer to, how are you feeling? They don't want to hear that everything feels gray, even the things that are red. That the laughter in the next room sounds like a different language. That your own thoughts echo like you're walking down a hallway with no end. So you stitch and stay quiet, and they call it healing. They say it's working too. You're more obedient now, less prone to wandering thoughts. You want to say that the thoughts still wander. You've just trained your mouth not to follow. The embroidery grows. Slowly, painfully, you make a rose today. It's crooked, but it exists. That's something. Someone will see it and say, oh, she's improving. They won't see the part where you pricked your finger on purpose. Just to feel something, you wipe the blood on the underside of the cloth, like a secret, like all the other ones. They say women are delicate, like lace, like glass, but you feel more like a thread, being pulled too tight. You miss your own voice, but silence is safer. You miss the part of you that laughed without asking permission, but she's quiet now, waiting. They say you'll get better if you keep stitching, so you do. One flower at a time, one silent hour at a time. And no one notices that every bloom is stitched in the same color, gray, not healing, but surviving. And for now, that's the only pattern that fits. You wake up feeling like your chest is full of wet wool. Again, not the nice kind either. The scratchy, secondhand, smells like goat kind. You haven't eaten since yesterday's broth, which tasted like boiled apology. You can't cry. You can't laugh. You just sit on the edge of the bed and stare at a wall that never blinks back. Your maid glances at you and mutters under her breath, she's got the spleen again. Ah, the spleen, that mysterious, moody organ that no one can quite find, but everyone agrees is the root of all feminine drama. In 1742, you are not anxious, not overwhelmed, not carrying the emotional weight of a life that was chosen for you, stitched tight into corsets and conversations you never asked for. No, you simply have the spleen. It's elegant in a way. Better than hysteria, at least. That one involved more screaming and dramatically tight bodices. The spleen, though, the spleen is quieter, sadder, like poetry with a limp. Your mother nods solemnly and prepares your treatment. A walk, a bath, and a long boring chat with the vicar. Pray it away, she says gently, as if sadness is just a naughty goose that wandered into your thoughts and needs gentle scolding. Your brother suggests marriage, of course. A man with a mustache and half a library card will surely yank you out of your existential despair. You excuse yourself to breathe. In the garden, The air smells like damp soil and roses that don't know they're in a sad woman's life. You sit on a stone bench, the kind that turns your spine into regret after 10 minutes. You don't mind. Pain is a distraction. A bird lands near you. It chirps once, then leaves. Even the bird has better things to do than watch you wither decoratively. You're expected to keep your chin high, your eyes soft, your voice pleasant. But inside, there's a storm, not violent, just steady, like rain tapping a window for hours, reminding you it's there, even when you try to sleep. The physician comes later with a velvet pouch. Inside, dried herbs, a few leeches, and a pamphlet on moral improvement. You ask if your spleen might improve without bleeding. He chuckles and says, spleens in women are especially stubborn. You do not slap him. This, too, is called progress. That night, you sip a bitter tonic, supposed to soothe the organs. It tastes like licorice and lies. You lie still in bed, hands folded, like a painting. That's all they want, really. A well-framed portrait of recovery. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You just carry a sadness no one is ready to name. So they named it for your spleen and blamed your womb and called it womanhood. It wasn't comfort, but it was 1742, and apparently that was enough. You haven't gotten out of bed in 2 days, or maybe 3. It's hard to tell when the curtains stay closed, and the only thing moving is the dust, drifting through the air like it has nowhere else to be. You're not sick, not exactly. Your body works. Technically, you can lift your arms, sit up, walk. You just don't want to. Not because you're dramatic, or rebellious, or possessed by anything except your own tired thoughts. But in this house, those aren't valid reasons. So, Father says, pray harder, as if your sadness is a sin, as if God's waiting for you to kneel harder, cry cleaner, and recite something with more emotional punctuation. He brings a Bible and leaves it by your bedside like a threat in hardback form. Read the Psalms, he says. David was sad, too. You don't argue. You just nod, like always. Then Mother comes in. Soft steps, warm hands. She doesn't say much. She never does when you're like this. Instead, she sets a cup on your bedside table, chamomile tea, lukewarm already. But she tried. She always does. Drink this, she whispers. It'll help you sleep. You're not sure if she means the tea or the silence. She sits for a while, doesn't touch you, doesn't ask anything, just watches the dust with you. That's the closest thing to understanding you felt in weeks. The tea tastes like flowers and fatigue. You sip it not because you believe it'll work, but because she made it. And that means something. Outside, the bells ring for evening prayer. Father doesn't knock. He just calls your name. His voice, already disappointed. You close your eyes. Pretend to sleep. Maybe he'll let God carry this one. In this house, emotions are either holy or herbal. You're allowed to feel things as long as they can be cured with a psalm or a plant. Anxiety, prayer and peppermint. Grief, psalms and sage. That empty, hollow feeling that no one has words for yet. Lavender oil and long stares. They mean well. That's the hardest part. They love you, They just don't know how to sit inside your sorrow without trying to scrub it away with faith and foliage. Father will say he's worried about your soul. Mother will say you're just a little delicate. You will say nothing because you've learned that silence is easier to swallow than explanations that go nowhere. Eventually, they'll think you're better because you smiled during supper, because you drank the tea, because you whispered, Amen. But the truth is, you're not better. You're just quieter. And here, that's close enough. You're sitting by the window, staring out at nothing in particular. The glass is fogged, but you haven't bothered to wipe it. What's the point? It's the same view every day. Gray sky, crooked trees, and the garden you're no longer allowed to walk in without supervision. Your hands are folded neatly in your lap, not because you're calm, but because you've learned that stillness is safer. Movement invites questions, and questions lead to answers like, she's not well. She needs rest. She's too delicate for the world. You remember when your brother fell apart last winter. He drank too much wine and stared at walls and wrote long, dramatic verses about death and God and longing. Everyone said he was brilliant, sensitive, a man of deep thoughts. You cried quietly once at the breakfast table, and they took away your shoelaces. He was given ink and paper. You were given a locked door and a room with one chair. They call it confinement, not a prison, just a temporary retreat for the nerves. You're allowed one book, the Bible, obviously. You can request another, but only if it doesn't contain melancholic themes, which means basically nothing worth reading. The nurse is kind. She brings you bland food and occasionally sneaks in a lemon wedge like it's contraband. You once asked her if she ever gets sad. She said, of course, then quickly added, but I shake it off, like a lady should. Your mother visits weekly. She tells you not to frown. It gives the staff ideas. You nod, because what else is there to do? Your brother, meanwhile, is still writing. His latest poem got published in a small literary journal. The title, Ode to a Cracked Soul. People are calling it haunting and heroic. You once said the world felt too loud, and they told you to lie down and think about gratitude. You aren't jealous. Not exactly. You just wish your sadness came with a pen instead of a prescription. At night, you lie in bed and listen to the house settle, wooden beams creaking like they, too, are exhausted. You think of all the women before you, the ones who sighed at the wrong time, or wept in public, or spoke when silence was the expectation. They were tucked away for their safety, for everyone else's comfort. The men painted their grief, published it, sang it from taverns. The women embroidered it into handkerchiefs and were told it was recovery. They'll say you're getting better soon because you've stopped arguing, because you smile on command, because your tea is always finished. But inside, you know, you're not healed. You're just hidden. And in this house, that's what passes for peace. It wasn't freedom, but it was 1841, and apparently that was enough. You're lying on a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw, goose feathers, and whatever dreams you haven't cried out yet. Your nightgown sticks to your back from sweat. The window's cracked just enough to let in the draft, and someone keeps pacing downstairs like it's a sport. You haven't eaten in a day, not because you're fasting, just because the idea of chewing makes you want to scream. Your head feels like it's full of fog and bees. Your chest is heavy. Your limbs? Decorative mostly. So when the doctor knocks and enters without waiting for an answer, again, you already know what he's going to say. Let's try bleeding you. Again, just to be sure. Ah, yes, your old friend. The bleeding, it cured precisely none of your problems last time. But you did get very good at lying still, while a grown man watched you slowly drain. He unwraps his little kit with the precision of someone far too excited about lancets. There's a cloth, a bowl, and the vague scent of old copper. Your complexion looks pale, he mutters. You want to say, yes, that's because you've removed most of my blood. But instead, you just blink at him, which in this household counts as defiance. He takes your wrist like he owns it, squinting at your veins as if they've offended him. Your mother stands in the doorway, wringing her hands and whispering about imbalance and bad airs. She suggests lavender water. The doctor waves her away like an annoying breeze. He says this will release the pressure in the mind. You wonder if there's a polite way to mention that your mind is not located in your elbow. But this is the 1700s. The mind is a mystery. The soul is up for debate. And the solution to all of it is apparently more blood loss. You feel the prick, then the warmth, then the familiar dizziness that tells you, yep, we're doing this again. He watches the bowl fill like it's a weather forecast. See? Already clearer, he says. Even though the blood looks exactly like blood, you close your eyes, not to rest, just to disappear temporarily. You think of all the times you've been bled for headaches, for heartache, for restlessness, for crying at a funeral too emotionally. Once, it was because you didn't smile during a meal. That one got noted in the family ledger. You wonder how much blood you've lost in the name of feeling better. Probably enough to fill a small bucket, possibly enough to resurrect your will to live. He bandages your arm with a bit too much pride, like he's just solved sadness. There, he says, you'll feel more like yourself in the morning. You smile, faintly, just enough to get him out of the room, because you know the truth. You're not going to feel like yourself. You're going to feel like someone who just got slightly more anemic. But it's fine, really, because now they think you're trying. They'll leave you alone for a few days. And in this house, that's the closest thing to peace you're allowed. It wasn't healing, but it was quiet. And sometimes that's enough. You haven't spoken all morning, not because you're stubborn or poetic or anything dramatic. You just don't have anything to say. Your thoughts feel like old molasses, thick, slow, and slightly rotten. You were quiet at breakfast, quiet during chores, quiet when the neighbor's dog barked at the sky for no reason. And of course, someone noticed. She's feeling blue, your aunt whispered, like it was a contagious condition. By afternoon, the local apothecary was summoned. You hoped, maybe, he'd say something like, let her rest, or it's just the weather. No, no, no. He brought out a little glass bottle and said, in that cheerful death sentence tone, time for a dose of mercury syrup. Ah, yes, nothing says emotional stability like liquid poison. You try not to flinch as he pours a silvery puddle into a tarnished spoon. The syrup glows like moonlight, and regret, thick, metallic, shimmering, This'll realign the mind. He says, works wonders on melancholia, toothache, sluggishness, and, well, everything, everything, including probably your intestines, dignity, and lifespan. You ask, politely, what's in it? He smiles. Mercury. Just a bit. You nod. Because what else can you do? This is the 1800s, and refusing a medical cure is how women get labeled. Difficult. You take the spoon, hold it, stare at it like it might blink. Then you drink. The taste is worse than the smell. Metallic, sour, and somehow angry, like it wants out of your mouth the moment it enters. It slides down your throat and immediately declares war on your stomach lining. Don't worry, the apothecary says cheerfully. Some light trembling and sweating is normal. Oh, good. Your mother pats your hand. You'll feel like yourself soon. You already feel like someone else. Someone who's definitely made poor decisions involving silver liquids. The trembling starts an hour later. Your hands shake. Your vision blurs. Your thoughts race, then crash into each other like ox carts on a narrow road. You lie in bed, sweating through your sheets, wondering if this is what healing is supposed to feel like, or if it's just what slow poisoning feels like. The house creaks, the mercury churns. You try to remember who you were before the syrup, probably still sad, but at least less radioactive. You're given another spoonful the next day. To keep the humors moving, they say. You'd prefer the humors sit down and shut up. But here, that's not an option. They want you cured, smiling, polite, even if it means glowing in the dark. Eventually, the shaking subsides. You blink at the ceiling, exhausted, nauseous, and too weak to be sad. See? Your aunt says. Much better. And in a way, she's right. You're not crying anymore. You're just too dizzy to remember why you were sad in the first place. It wasn't joy, but it was silence. And in the 1800s, that was often close enough. You haven't spoken above a whisper in 2 weeks, not because your throat hurts, but because everything inside you feels echoey, like your soul moved out and left nothing but a faint draft behind. So naturally, the family calls a doctor, and not just any doctor, the special one, the one who owns gloves. He listens to your heartbeat briefly, asks you 3 vague questions, then nods gravely, like he's just diagnosed you with an existential crisis and also mild indigestion. She needs a change of air, he says. Solitude, clean cold, somewhere remote, secluded, and ideally damp. You blink. Your father says, of course. Your mother wrings her hands and asks if they can bring your embroidery. By the end of the week, you're bundled into a cart with a fur blanket, 3 jars of preserved pears, and the world's most passive-aggressive chaperone, Sister Judith. You ask where you're going. To a healing cave, someone says. Ah, of course, the classic cave cure. You arrive in a forest that smells like mold, moss, and bad decisions. The air is so crisp it could slap you. The cave is small, dark, and, yes, impressively cold. There's a cot, a cracked chamber pot, a single candle that flickers like it's judging you. Sister Judith unpacks your pears, then leaves. You'll feel better in a few days, she says, not unkindly. They always do. You lie down. The stone beneath the cot radiates sorrow, or maybe just frost. This is your vacation, your rest cure, the cave treatment. The idea is that the cold will shock the nerves. The solitude will quieten the mind. The echoes will remind you how small your troubles really are. What they don't mention is that you're now alone with your thoughts, a damp pillow, and several dozen confused spiders. On day 2, the cold seeps into your knees. On day 3, your tears freeze halfway down your face. You start talking to the candle. It doesn't respond, which somehow makes it a better conversationalist than your doctor. You think about who you were before this, a little sad, a little tired, a little overwhelmed by the sheer volume of expectations pinned to your every polite nod. Now you're all of those things, plus hypothermic. You eat pears with a shaky spoon. Wrap yourself in the fur blanket like it's an apology. Stare at the cave wall until it starts to look like your aunt. Eventually, you stop counting the days. Then, one morning, you wake up, and the cold isn't quite so cruel. The silence doesn't scream as loud. You step outside the cave and let the gray light wash over you like a sigh. You don't feel healed. You feel emptied. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they didn't want you fixed, just hollow enough to come back and smile politely. So you do. You go home. They say you look renewed. You nod, because that's what's expected. You don't mention the candle, or the spiders, or how your tears made tiny frozen pearls on the stone floor. You just smile, sip your tea, and never eat pears again. It wasn't recovery, but it was quiet. And in 1814, that was called progress. You haven't left your room in 3 days. The fire's out, the bread's stale, and your hair looks like it fought a small storm and lost. Your eyes are hollow, your voice is soft, and when your aunt asked what was wrong, you simply shrugged, which, apparently, was the final straw, because this morning the village priest arrived with holy water and a bell and a face that said, "We've skipped past emotional distress and gone straight to demonic interference. You're not depressed," they say. "You're possessed." Allegedly, it starts, as these things always do, with whispers in the kitchen. "She used to be so cheerful. She hasn't smiled since Michaelmas. She didn't finish her stew last night." And just like that, you're no longer a girl in mourning. You're a situation. The priest stands at the foot of your bed, eyeing you like you might start levitating at any moment. You yawn. He flinches. They ask if you've been seeing shadows. Yes, your own. They ask if you've been hearing voices. Also, yes, your family's, constantly. But you say nothing, because experience has taught you that silence is safer than sarcasm. You are given a list of symptoms: sadness, refusal to eat, excessive sighing, preference for solitude. Inexplicable. Staring at corners, you realize, horrified, that this is just your Tuesday. The bell rings, the holy water spritzes, you blink, and someone gasps. They say you recoiled. You say the water was cold. They say that's exactly what a demon would say. You are escorted to the chapel, sat in a chair that looks more like a throne of anxiety. They light candles. They chant. The baker's wife peers in through a crack in the door. like this is theater. You think of your sadness, how quiet it's been, how long it's lingered, how it feels like a fog with no direction, but now it's being rebranded as evil, as other, as something that needs to be cast out. You want to explain that sometimes grief is just grief, that sometimes the world goes quiet inside your chest and doesn't come back for a while. But there's no space for that here, only exorcisms and herbal tea. They try to make you vomit twice to purge the spirit. You do, eventually, out of nerves. They cheer. You go to bed that night wrapped in blankets and fear, not of demons, but of being treated like one. The next morning, they say you look brighter. You say nothing, but you hold your spoon with extra purpose just to prove you're fine. They stop ringing the bell. They stop calling the priest. You stop looking anyone in the eye because now everything you feel is suspicious and every silence is a potential curse. You're not better. You're just careful. It wasn't healing, but it was survival. And in 1697, that was all a woman could hope for. You wake up and immediately regret it. Not in a dramatic, poetic way. More like, oh, this again. The room smells like damp wood and old bread. You've slept crooked. Your back aches. And your first coherent thought is, why do my lungs feel like they've been sighing in their sleep? You don't move. Not because you can't. You just don't see the point. Downstairs, your aunt is whispering with the midwife. Again, you can hear the phrases, they think you can't, won't eat. Just lies there. Could be the devil, could be the moon. By mid-morning, someone knocks. You don't answer. That's apparently enough consent. They come in carrying a jar, a thick, lumpy jar. It smells like vinegar's evil cousin. Mustard plaster, the healer says cheerfully, for the spine. Clears the melancholy right out. You don't even get a say in it. Your nightgown is tugged down, your back exposed to the brisk air, and the deep shame of existing, while female and sad in the 1700s. She slathers it on, like she's basting a roast. Mustard, real mustard, ground seeds, vinegar, some mystery heat source from the bowels of medieval hell. It burns. Immediately. Good, she says. Means it's working. You don't scream. That would be dramatic. Instead, tears quietly leak out of your eyes, like your soul's melting from the spine down. They say the heat draws out the bad humors. That melancholy can't survive in warmth. They don't consider that you might not survive being turned into a human spice rack. By afternoon, your back is red, puffy, angry, but you're upright. Slightly, because the pain is so distracting, you've temporarily forgotten the weight in your chest. They cheer. She's better. Your aunt makes you soup. The midwife says you should marry soon. Apparently, nothing fixes emotional instability like binding yourself legally to a man who still thinks wind causes illness. The next day, they try a second application. You say no. They pretend not to hear. Mustard. Again, it's the most attention you've received in weeks. You start to wonder if that's what the sadness was for. A quiet plea for someone to notice before you vanished entirely. Now you're being rubbed with condiments. So, progress? Your back itches for days. You can't lie on it, can't cry, can't think. just sting. They say the melancholy is gone, but you know better. It's not gone. It's just deeper, quiet now, hiding somewhere the mustard can't reach. It wasn't healing, but it was spicy. And in 1721, that was practically the same thing. You're sitting in the corner again. Same chair, same blanket, same quiet panic, slowly tightening behind your ribs, like someone's winding a clock with no off switch. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the house, someone is praying too loudly. You sip tea that tastes like boiled weeds and disappointment. Today's blend, chamomile, nettle, and something called woman's balance. You're not sure what that means, but it smells like a garden that gave up. Your mother slips in, all soft hands and sharper hopes. She sets a tiny book on your lap. The Bible, again. You should read Psalm 34, she whispers. It always helps me when I'm feeling off. You want to tell her this isn't off. This isn't a spiritual hiccup. This is grief that doesn't even know what it lost. This is a fog you wake up with, eat through, breathe through, but instead, you nod. Because what else is there? You read the verse, slowly, like maybe it will read you back and explain what's wrong. It doesn't. You sip more tea. It burns slightly. They keep saying things like, you need to rest. You need fresh air. You need faith. But what you need is for someone to say, I believe you. Instead, they pray. Hard. Sometimes in the next rooms. Sometimes over your sleeping body. You once woke up with oil on your forehead and no memory of why. Your aunt brings a lemon. Just one. She says it clears sadness from the liver. You stare at it. It stares back. You both know it won't help. They say you should write letters, go for walks, smile more. You want to scream, but nice girls don't scream. Nice girls pray and steep herbs and disappear in layers. You memorize the taste of silence. You count the cracks in the ceiling. You pretend. This is normal. They say you're healing. You're not. You're just tired of disappointing everyone with your continued existence. The tea keeps coming. The verses keep coming. And so does the quiet, louder than ever. It wasn't comfort, but it was routine. And in this house, routine was sacred, even when it tasted like boiled leaves and smelled faintly of desperation. You're curled up in your favorite chair, the one by the window where the light hits just right in the morning, soft, warm, like the sun's trying to apologize for everything else. There's a book in your lap, a good one, the kind that pulls you out of yourself. You're halfway through a sentence about a woman on a ship when your mother walks in and gently, too gently, closes the book. The doctor says, you shouldn't be reading so much, she says, like she's delivering a verdict, not a heartbreak. You blink. You wait for her to laugh. She doesn't. Apparently, thinking too much is what made you like this. Sad, nervous, too internal. Your book is now on the table, out of reach. The prescription, rest, light sewing, a daily walk with someone cheerful, and absolutely, under no circumstances, intellectual stimulation. Because in this house, and frankly, in this century, a woman reading too much is considered an act of emotional self-harm. They say books cloud the mind, invite melancholia, disrupt your womanly nature. No one says this to your brother, of course. He reads constantly. He gets headaches and mood swings, and they call it scholarly temperament. You get quiet and tired, and they call it a crisis. You once stayed up late, finishing a novel, and cried at the ending. They said it was too intense for your constitution. You wanted to say, no, I just felt something. But instead, they took your books. You're allowed to read scripture, of course, and maybe a moral tale if it's got a bland heroine and no plot, but not philosophy, not poetry, not anything that might make your mind wander too far away from the hearth. They're afraid of your thoughts because they don't understand that what makes you sad isn't the reading, it's the not reading, it's the stillness, the being watched, the pretending. You sit by the window with your hands in your lap. The sun is still there, but it doesn't feel warm anymore. Your mind itches. It wants stories. It wants to run. But instead, they hand you embroidery thread, as if you can stitch your soul back into silence, as if your brain were a candle they could snuff out politely. You smile, a small, practiced one. They think it means you're getting better. Really, it just means you've learned to hide your hunger. It wasn't healing, but it was obedience. And in 1852, that was the next best thing. You've been crying too much again. Not loudly, just enough for the pillows to feel damp and the family to feel concerned. Your appetite's gone, your posture's collapsing, and you've been staring at the fireplace so long they're starting to worry it's contagious. So the physician returns with his usual blend of confidence and zero understanding. He squints at you like you're a puzzle he regrets picking up. Take the waters, he says, nodding, like this is wisdom and not just his go-to for every female complaint from grief to hiccups. Translation: you're going to a sad little lake. They pack you off in a carriage with one blanket, two boiled eggs, and a borrowed bonnet that smells like mildew and regret. 3 hours later, you arrive at a healing spring that looks suspiciously like a cold, muddy pond with delusions of grandeur. There's a sign that says, "The waters have cured many." It does not say of what. A woman in a bonnet twice the size of her head greets you with a knowing smile and a ladle. You're shown to your bathing gown. It is thin. It is damp. It is optimism in fabric form. You are led into the water. It's gray. It's cold. It smells faintly like sulfur and soggy hope. This will balance your humors, someone whispers. You're not sure if they mean your bodily fluids or your mood. Either way, the water feels like a punishment for feeling too much. You sit waist deep, teeth chattering, while another woman 2 feet away moans about invisible pressures. She's been here 6 weeks. She now speaks exclusively in vague metaphors. The lake ripples. A duck floats by, judging you. You try to feel better. You do. You close your eyes and imagine the sadness dissolving into the water. But mostly, you just get pruny. After 30 minutes, a bell rings. Bath time's over. You're handed a coarse towel and congratulated on being brave. Back at the lodge, you're given root tea and a sermon about patience. You're told to return to the water twice daily. No one's ever stayed sad after a week. Here, they promise. You suspect this is because no one stays longer than a week. You lie in a creaky bed that smells like damp reeds and try not to think about how this is considered cutting-edge therapy. You miss your bed, your books, even your sadness. which, unlike this lake, had depth. They say the waters are sacred, that they pull the sorrow from your bones, but really, it's just a bath in a cold pond, while people you don't know politely pretend you're improving. It wasn't healing, but it was wet, and in 1827, that was enough to call it progress. You've tried the tea, you've tried the lake, you've tried not feeling anything at all, and yet, here you are, still staring out the window like the sky owes you an explanation. You haven't smiled in weeks. You haven't embroidered anything except a lopsided tree that your aunt keeps mistaking for a sad dog. You haven't spoken in full sentences since the bathwater incident. So now, the family's trying the final remedy, the last card in the 19th century fix her deck. Marriage, not yours specifically, just a marriage to someone soon, because, as the logic goes, if your soul is fraying, surely the solution is to hand it to a man who smells like saddle leather and owns 2 horses and exactly 0 emotional intelligence. He arrives at tea time. His name is Charles, or Edward, or possibly Gerald. It doesn't matter. They're all different shades of slightly damp wallpaper. You are summoned. You are introduced. He says, "You look well." You nod. You do not. He smiles like he just complimented your entire existence. They leave you alone for 10 minutes so you can connect. You stare at the fire. He stares at your hands. You both survive it. He asks if you like geese. You say you haven't thought about geese in some time. He laughs loudly, like this is going swimmingly. By supper, the arrangement is underway. You'll be married by spring, or sooner, or next Tuesday, depending on how long you keep looking. Off. Your mother pats your shoulder and says, "You'll feel better once you have someone to take care of you." You want to say, "I don't need someone. I need to be heard." But instead, you sip your soup and try to keep your soul from leaking into your spoon. No one asks what you want, because wanting things is indulgent. But marrying, that's medicine. They say marriage will give you purpose, that a household, a husband, and maybe 3 babies will silence whatever sadness you've been harboring. Like domesticity is the antidote to despair. Like folding linens can cure a breaking mind. He writes you a letter the next day. It says, "Looking forward to our future. I'm told you're quite docile." You fold it neatly. Like the rest of your life, they say you'll feel better soon. But what they mean is you'll be occupied. And if you're busy enough, maybe no. One will notice you've simply vanished beneath the chores. It wasn't healing, but it was marriage. And in 1843, that was practically the same thing. You're sitting at the table, sipping broth. You're wearing a soft gray dress. Not because you picked it, but because no one questions someone in gray. The fire crackles. Your sister is talking about butter. Your uncle is laughing too loudly at something no one else found funny. And you're nodding at all the right times. You smile, softly, practiced, just enough to pass. They think you're better now, because you're no longer crying at breakfast, because your hands no longer shake when they pass you the bread, because you said, "I'm fine," twice this week without your voice cracking. But the truth is, you're just quieter, quieter in your steps, quieter in your thoughts, quieter in the way you fold yourself into the corners of rooms, hoping no one notices that the light behind your eyes hasn't come back yet. They think silence is peace, but for you, it's armor. It keeps the questions away, the concern, the suggestions. They stopped offering tea, stopped patting your shoulder, stopped quoting scripture at you like it was medicine, which is what you wanted, mostly. But now the quiet is a little too good at staying. It follows you into your bedroom, into your reading chair, into your chest. It's in the way your heartbeat echoes now. Not fast, just lonely. You're praised for your composure. Such a strong girl. Such poise. She's back to her old self. You smile again, a little tighter this time. They never knew your old self. They just missed the version of you that didn't make them uncomfortable. The version that laughed politely and didn't stare too long at the window like she was waiting for her own ghost to arrive. They think healing is noise, clinking teacups, laughter, footsteps returning to normal. But sometimes healing is silence, and sometimes silence is retreat, and sometimes retreat is just defeat rebranded. But they don't see that because you're eating, because you're dressed, because your hands are folded, and your tone is pleasant. You're doing better, and they all exhale with relief. Meanwhile, inside you, it's still raining, gently, constantly, but no one notices the storm if you learn how to smile during it. It wasn't healing, but it was palatable. And in this house, that was the finish line. You're sitting by the hearth again, same chair, same blanket, same air, thick with the smell of old wood smoke and unsaid things. There's stew on the stove, someone humming faintly in the next room. The sun is pretending to shine through the tiny window, but it's mostly just light trying its best. You pull the blanket tighter, not because you're cold, but because it feels like protection. From what? You couldn't exactly say. You're not crying anymore. That part's past. Mostly. Now, it's the ache, the quiet one, the kind that doesn't shout or beg. It just sits beside you, like a familiar visitor who doesn't need to speak to be known. They all think you're fine now, because you're not in bed, because you smiled at the butcher, because you hummed half a hymn while folding laundry. They don't realize that healing isn't a return, it's a reconstruction. That the version of you they remember, the bright eyed one, always helpful, always pleasant, she's not coming back. You've changed because the sadness didn't leave. It just learned to walk quietly beside you, and you learned to live anyway. You learned how to breathe through the fog, how to sip tea and mean it, how to look at a flower and not feel grief for its short life, but relief that something small can bloom anyway. You started talking again, not to everyone, just to the ones who don't flinch. When you say, "Today was hard," you still wake up heavy sometimes, still forget to eat, still feel the tears collect behind your eyes like rain clouds waiting for permission, but you also laugh, sometimes, and mean it. That matters. You're not the girl who broke. You're the girl who bent, who curled inward and grew anyway, in silence, in sadness, in survival. They think the sadness lost. They're wrong. It's still here. But so are you. It wasn't a cure, but it was a beginning. And in the end, that was enough.